One day you are reading the news and a headline says, one company just acquired another. A press release, a number, and you assume the deal came together overnight. But these processes are not fast, and no strategic buyer takes the first step toward putting an offer on the table without already knowing the answer to a handful of very specific questions. Before any purchase agreement gets signed, there's a checklist to verify the company fits the buyer's acquisition strategy. One note before we get into it, this applies to strategic buyers, and not all strategics buy for the same reason. Some buy defensively, closing a gap before a competitor closes it first, protecting market share they already have. Others buy offensively, entering a new market, getting into something disruptive, or moving faster on their own product roadmap. The diligence looks similar either way. What changes is the urgency and how much they are willing to pay for it. The checklist has two parts. Neither is enough on its own. Two companies with identical revenue can close at completely different multiples. The difference is rarely just in the spreadsheet. Part 1. The qualitative test. In data and AI infra, the first question is not about the product. It's about the data behind it. The real question is whether a competitor could rebuild this with enough time and money. And here's a nuance almost nobody explains well. Not all data modes are equal. A proprietary dataset generated by your own customers in production is worth far more than a licensed one, because in theory your competitor can buy that too. If they can, the barrier to entry is low. The second is depth, not breadth. Is the product woven into how the customer actually works, or is it something they could swap out on a random Tuesday? How dependent is your customer on your solution? This gets measured with data. Average contract length, cost of switching providers, how many internal systems depend on your API to keep running. Nobody buys because something looked good in a demo. They buy something a customer would fight to keep. And that's proven with renewal history, not with a pitch. Third question, and with the AI boom, this one has become critical. Is the AI actually running in production, generating revenue with real customers, or is it still a pilot dressed up as a product? In production means something specific. Measurable revenue tied to what the system does, real SLAs, customers who take a penalty if it went down. This question specifically is what separates generic AI from AI that actually earns the premium the market is paying for it right now. And that premium is real. Companies with genuine AI capabilities are closing between 30 and 50% above comparable software without it. The fourth is the one founders like least to hear. Does the business survive without you? Not with your team, without you. Here's how that actually gets checked. How much knowledge lives only in your head, whether real documentation exists, whether the rest of the team makes decisions or just executes what you approved. If everything runs through you, buyers discount the price for it, and you'll probably get a longer earnout than you would like. We'll come back to that. The fifth is culture, whether the team fits how the buyer actually operates. More deals fall apart after signing over this than almost anything else in the file, because it's the only one of the five that cannot be fixed with a clause. Part 2. The quantitative test. With the qualitative side settled, the numbers come in. Revenue growth, 20% or more year over year, is where a company starts registering as high growth. But a buyer who knows what they are doing doesn't just look at the number. They look at where it comes from. Growth from expanding existing customers gets paid for more than growth from pure new logo acquisition. It's cheaper to sustain and more predictable. And beyond that, is that revenue recurring or not? Recurring revenue gives a buyer a visibility that makes them willing to pay more for your company than they would otherwise. Net revenue retention, how much revenue you keep and grow from existing customers without adding a single new one. 100% is the baseline for an enterprise business, 95% for SMBs. But if you sell AI infrastructure, the market asks for more, 110 heading toward 120. Logo retention. Are you keeping the customers you sign whether they spend more or less? 90% in enterprise and 75% for SMBs is the line between sticky and leaking. Revenue concentration. What share of your revenue sits with your single biggest customer? Below 15% for any one account and below 40% across your top 5 to 10 accounts combined is where a buyer stops reading your growth as risk. Above that, every large customer is an account that, if it works, takes the growth story with it. Gross margin. Above 75%, a software business starts to look like software. Above 85%, that's the number that says this business scales almost for free from here. And the metric that ties it all together, the rule of 40, growth plus margin. Cross 40 and you're a credible asset. Cross 50 and companies at that level trade, on average, at 2 to 3 times the multiple of the one sitting below 20. But not every 40 is equal. One built by cutting spend is not the same asset as one built on real, retained growth. On a spreadsheet, they look identical. In the negotiating room, they don't. Here's what decides how much of that number you actually see. Clearing the checklist raises your valuation on paper, but how that valuation gets paid is a different fight entirely. More and more tech deals carry an earnout, part of the price tied to future performance, not to signing. Sounds reasonable. The fine print usually is not the average tech earnout pays out only a fraction of what it promises on paper, and a meaningful share of them pay nothing at all, which is exactly why earnouts generate so much litigation. If your business depends on you to run, point 4 from earlier, you will see more earnouts, not less. It's the direct consequence of not having resolved that question before you sat down to negotiate. Here's the part that most people don't find out until they have already decided to sell. None of this is fixed. All of it gets built. Founder dependency doesn't get fixed in a meeting. It takes 12 to 18 months to reduce it enough for a buyer to actually notice it in how the business runs, not just in what you tell them. Revenue concentration doesn't drop by signing one more big client. It drops by diversifying over several consecutive quarters. Net revenue retention doesn't climb overnight. It climbs after a full year of prioritizing expansion over chasing new logos. And real production evidence doesn't get manufactured for a diligence process. It accumulates, contract by contract, while nobody's watching yet. The companies that get the best terms are not the ones who fix this in the 6 months before going to market. They are the ones who started preparing 3, even 5 years earlier, when there was no buyer in the room yet. Just the discipline to build every one of these metrics as if there already was. The checklist is the accumulated result of how you ran the company in the years before, not an exam you pass on a deal day. And how that result gets paid in real cash or in conditional promises depends on how many of these questions you'd already answered before you sat down at the table. This is the checklist. Taking a company through to close with the right buyer and the right time is what we do at Moeller for data and AI infrastructure companies. Contact details in the description.